Welcome students of Form 2 at this video about government structure. And we're talking about legislature, and in my part 1 of this video I already told you legislature is about the law and making laws. And the law is in papiamentu lei or leinan. Yeah? And laws are very important in a society because they tell us what we can do and what we can do. So I told you already, this is a part 2 of a series of 3. So there is one video earlier. As I told you many times already, I am working for the Sky Pre-Universitario, and we have the so-called CSEC system, and this CSEC system comes from the Commonwealth English Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean, and most of them are a member of CARICOM, and it's also called the CXC. So if you're watching this from outside of the island of Curacao, it could also be very well helpful for you because I'm following this program. And we're talking about describing the structure of government. Yes, and that is what you'll have to be able to do. And in this video in particular, this is talking about the legislature. Yeah, a legislature is made by parliament, also called the legislature. They make legislation, complicated laws. Exam tip. Make sure you are familiar with the structures of the different government systems in the Caribbean. We'll talk about that later on actually. And about the different powers of functions of prime ministers and head of states. This is very important. So, the role of the opposition. What is the opposition and how important it is? Yeah. Well, when talking about legislature, the opposition parties criticize and oppose government policies which they so they criticize and oppose government policies which they disagree. So you have the government, but you also have the opposition, and the opposition are the political parties that have not been nominated or elected into government. Inside the word opposition is the word oppose. So you oppose something, and in this case you oppose the government. You criticize them, you check their functioning, you check if they're not corrupt or doing their work not properly. So they criticize and oppose government policies, so their plans. A policy is not a word for a plan. And what does a strong opposition actually do? And for your information, we're talking now April 2025. In opposition in Curacao are, for instance, the PIN and the MAN-PIN and the PAR. They are the two opposition parties, but also this year the PNP, because the MFK can rule by its own with its 13 seats in parliament in the elections of March 2025. And the MAN-PIN, the PAR, and the PNP, they are the opposition parties. And what do they have to do? What do these three parties, the MAN-PIN, the PAR, and the PNP, actually have to do? They have to ensure that the legislature keeps the power of the executive. Yeah, they ensure that the legislature keeps the power of the executive in check, that they check it, ensure that the government is accountable for its actions, revealing weakness, mismanagement of corruption. So again, they ensure that the legislature keeps the power of the executive in check. Yeah, they check if they do their work properly in check, in my best handwriting. And second one is as follows. They also ensure that the government is accountable for its actions, revealing weakness, mismanagement, or corruption. And the third point, how you can see that there is a strong opposition, is to introduce its own bills to improve the governance of the country. So they also, although they are in opposition, they still try to improve how the country is actually governed. What limits the effectiveness of the opposition? So sometimes we do not have a strong opposition. And in what case don't we have a strong opposition? So what limits or prevents the strong opposition? That is what we see here. The effectiveness of the opposition can be limited if ministers use certain tactics. Yeah, we've seen this already actually. So the effectiveness of the opposition can be limited if ministers use delaying tactics. So they try to delay things, they try to extend certain moments in parliament, so they delay things, they delay. In America, they do filibusters, keep very long speeches in parliament, and it is frequently voted out because it is a minority. So the opposition has one huge disadvantage. They do not have the majority, in mayoría en el parlamento. They don't have the majority in parliament, so they need the government political parties in parliament to help them. Yeah, so frequently they're outvoted because they don't have enough votes because they are a minority in parliament, like you can see here where I underscored it. Yeah, so when do we don't have a strong opposition, ministers use tactics to delay it. For instance, holding very long speeches in parliament. They do this in the United States, or finding small errors in the proposals in parliament. All things is actually not very important, but you can use them as government, and sometimes they are outvoted because the opposition is a minority in parliament. That's the essence of opposition. What are the key points that we talked about this in this part 2? Yeah, we talked about the different branches in government. And what are those branches? Legislature. We're talking about that now. So the first branch of government is legislature. The second one is the executive. The executive is the government with the prime ministers and the ministers, and the government acting as a kind of head of state, a replacement for the king, and the judiciary, where you wind up if you do not hold yourself accountable to the law. If you rob a mini market, or if you don't pay your taxes, or if you attack another person violently, you get into contact with the judiciary. Yeah, and also we talked in the earlier video of this part, we talked about the principle of the separation of powers, and it divides powers between the three branches of government. Yeah, this is very important, the principle of separation of powers, like you can see here. Let's use another color to be honest. The principle of separation of powers. So three powers, three branches. So you could see government like a tree. The tree has like branches, and the branches, you have one branch that splits into three smaller branches, and alike, government also is divided into judiciary, executive, and legislature. Yeah, and we have two kinds of legislatures. We have a unicameral legislature and a bicameral legislature, and the bicameral one consists out of two chambers, and a unicameral one only consists of one chamber. And this is what we talked about in this video specifically. A powerful, strong opposition, another word for powerful is strong, challenges the government. So they criticize government, they check if they're not corrupt, they use their limited power in parliament really to check, to control, to hold the government accountable, and tries to introduce its own bills and legislature. A bill, or double L, is another word for legislature. And an easier word for legislature is law. Yeah, a law. And in Pavimentu, this is called lei. Yeah, and it introduces its own bills. Why do we need new laws? Because times are changing, and also criminal behavior and violent behavior and deception and deceit, things that people do, unfortunately, also changes. They introduce their own bills, but one of the disadvantages of the opposition is that they are in a minority. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, talking about the opposition and legislature and introducing new bills and new legislature. If you have a question, you can ask it below. Again, for those looking at this video from another country, I'm talking about the CXC program and especially the CSEC program to be exact. And we're talking about the topic of government. And I hope now that you better can describe the structure of government, and one step better you can describe the structure of legislature in Curacao. This is part 2, and a part 3 is on its way. If you want to subscribe, you can do that below. If you have questions, you can also post a question below or ask that during class. For now, enjoy your day, weekend, or week, and I hope to see you soon during class.